I saw more than 2 million Americans in arms. The doughboy went into the war that gave him his first experience with Europe's geography.
In April 1917, the United States entered the First World War. It is little known that, at that time, the United States was already at war. From 1912 to 1917, it had invaded and occupied no fewer than 5 countries, and occupied parts of a 6th. When the United States Constitution was framed, the Founding Fathers conceived that the new nation had little need for a standing army. The defence and security of the Republic would be guarded by ordinary citizens, who could be called upon to defend their homes, taking up the arms they kept close by. A mythology was born, that brave citizens of the land of the free would defeat imperial armies. The mythology developed through 1812, where it was said that settlers with their squirrel guns put to flight the ordered ranks of British soldiers. Then came expansion westwards across a continent, according to the dictates of manifest destiny, a belief that the United States was a unique society, an exceptional nation, chosen by God to be the model and leader of the world. The mythology also expanded. The indigenous inhabitants of the West were portrayed as attacking in enormous numbers, surrounding small groups of US soldiers who had to hold out against huge odds. The Indians were often pictured charging in ranks, not unlike the ranks of imperial soldiers. And always the cavalry saved the day, dispersing the enemy. The westward expansion continued to the ocean. There it had to stop, but not so did manifest destiny. 120 years after 13 small colonies formed a United States, the leaders of the Republic gazed past natural borders, west to Asia, and south to Mexico and the nations of Central America. A war with the tottering Spanish Empire resulted in the occupation of Cuba and Puerto Rico. An ambitious and charismatic politician named Theodore Roosevelt built upon the US military mythology. US forces, numerous and well equipped with heavy weapons, defeated the Spanish army. Roosevelt's Rough Riders, the epitome of the frontier horsemen, captured the popular imagination of Americans, aided by shrewd media campaigns. There was no sign of the African-American soldiers who charged up San Juan Hill. United States forces occupied Cuba from 1898 to 1902, then again from 1906 to 1909, again in 1912, and then from 1917 to 1922, when it withdrew, but retained a degree of supervision over Cuba's affairs. Prior to 1914, the United States was sensitive to European involvement in Central and South America. When the Mexican government of Victoriano Huerta began negotiating with the Germans for arms, the US government of President Woodrow Wilson decided on a military demonstration. The pretext for intervention was the arrest of 9 US sailors for entering a fuel depot in Tampico. The sailors were released, but the US government demanded an apology and also a 21-gun salute to the sailors. The apology was given, but not the salute. The US fleet, with large contingents of Marines, sailed for Veracruz in April 1914. The initial landings were unopposed, but soon Mexican patriots began to fight back against the invaders. There were some intense firefights, but superior American arms and numbers carried the day. The occupation lasted until November, until after the Huerta government had fallen. President Wilson directed that 56 Medals of Honor should be awarded to the occupying forces of Veracruz. This number was more than were awarded for the entire Spanish-American War. Some of the awardees protested that they had not earned America's highest military award. One of the protesters was a Captain Smedley Butler. He was ordered to accept the Medal of Honor and ordered to wear it. The weakness of central government in Mexico led to the rise of bandits and warlords. One was the former governor of the northern state of Chihuahua. His name was Jose Arambula, and he was nicknamed Pancho Villa. Initially, the United States gave him support, but when President Woodrow Wilson switched that support to another general, Villa decided to attack US interests. Then, on 9 March 1916, Villa made a raid into the United States, attacking Columbus and New Mexico. His men burnt the town and took military supplies. In May and June, Villa's men made further attacks on small towns in Texas. 5,000 US soldiers under General John J. Pershing were ordered to enter Mexico, destroy Villa's army, and capture Pancho Villa himself. Ironically, Pershing had once met Villa and was photographed with him. Behind Pershing is a Lieutenant George S. Patton. For 9 months, penetrating deep into Mexico, US soldiers and Mexicans fought a series of battles, some involving hundreds of men. Pancho Villa's armed bands were scattered, but Villa himself was never captured. He continued to be a force in Mexican politics until he was murdered in 1923. US forces were withdrawn to home soil in February 1917, and General Pershing went on to command the US troops sent to Europe in 1918.